The great economic debate, more than just numbers. In a sunlit economics lecture hall, Associate Professor Kong began with a warm smile. Good morning, everyone. Today, we won't start with complex formulas or dense graphs. Instead, let's tackle a foundational question. Why is economics often called the queen of the social sciences? He continued, his voice resonating with passion, because it touches the very core of the human condition, scarcity. Our society has finite resources, time, money, clean water, skilled labor, but our wants and desires are virtually infinite. Economics is the science of how we manage that fundamental tension. Before he could elaborate, Fan, a student with a sharp entrepreneurial glint in her eye, raised her hand. Professor, that leads directly to the first big question, doesn't it? What to produce? For my friends and me trying to launch a tech startup, this is everything. With our limited seed money, do we develop the social media app or the productivity tool? The wrong choice means we fail before we even begin. Qian, a practical-looking young man beside her, immediately added, "But how to produce is just as critical. My family runs a small furniture factory. We could invest in expensive German automation that would triple our output but require laying off half our staff. Or we could hire more local artisans. It's a constant trade-off between pure efficiency and our social responsibility to the community." "And you're both missing the most important question. For whom to produce?" declared Dai, a young man known for his idealism. "Is that furniture for luxury high-rises or for affordable public housing? Is Than's app for a niche, wealthy user base or designed to be accessible to everyone?" The very fabric of social equity is woven from the answer to this question. "Excellent," Professor Kong beamed, clearly pleased. "You've perfectly framed the three pillars, and in doing so, you've all stumbled upon the very first principle of economics. People face trade-offs. To get one thing, we must give up another." Thang, a mature student who had returned to university after several years in the workforce, spoke up calmly. "This directly relates to opportunity cost, then. The cost of me sitting in this lecture isn't just the tuition fee. It's the salary I gave up by not being at my old job this morning. That foregone income is the real, tangible cost of my education." "I see it differently," Than countered, leaning forward. "That's thinking too broadly. Principle 3 says rational people think at the margin. I don't worry about the entire cost of my 4-year degree versus 4 years of salary. I think about the benefit of this next hour of class versus one more hour I could spend coding for my startup. A rational decision is made when the marginal benefit of an action exceeds its marginal cost." A student named Long, who had been quietly sketching in his notebook, looked up. "But Than's rational decision assumes we are always logical robots. What about Principle 4? People respond to incentives. Sometimes incentives create irrational behavior. For instance, a daycare in Israel started fining parents who were late picking up their kids. Logically, lateness should have decreased. Instead, it increased. The fine removed the guilt, turning it into a simple paid service." "That's a fascinating exception, Long," Qian conceded, "but you can't deny the power of well-designed incentives. Look at the plastic bag tax in many cities. It's a small financial disincentive, but it has dramatically reduced plastic waste by nudging people to bring reusable bags. It's a clear, rational response to a price signal." The discussion pivoted. "Professor," Dai asked, his brow furrowed with concern, "if everyone is just responding to incentives and pursuing their own self-interest, how can the invisible hand of the market, as Adam Smith called it, possibly lead to good outcomes for society as a whole? What about public goods, like national defense or scientific research?" "Because of Principle 5, trade can make everyone better off." Qian answered. "The invisible hand works through voluntary exchange. A farmer doesn't grow wheat out of kindness. He does it to trade for things he needs. A doctor doesn't treat patients for free. Through specialization and trade, we all get access to more goods and services than we could ever produce on our own. It's a system of mutual benefit. A student named Mai, who had been listening with a skeptical expression, finally spoke. That sounds great in a textbook, Qian. But does that win-win trade always work fairly on a global scale? When one country specializes in exporting raw coffee beans for a few dollars a pound, and another country specializes in roasting, packaging, and branding that coffee to sell for $20 a cup, is that really a mutually beneficial relationship? Or does it just reinforce existing inequalities? A crucial and complex question, Mai, Professor Kong affirmed, his tone serious. This is where simple principles meet a messy reality. While trade theory promises mutual gains, factors like historical colonialism, unequal bargaining power, and international trade agreements can heavily skew the benefits. It proves that markets do not exist in a vacuum. They are embedded in a world of politics and power. And that, the professor said, turning to the whiteboard, brings us to Principle 7. Governments can sometimes improve market outcomes. When the market, left to its own devices, fails to allocate resources efficiently, we have what's called a market failure. Dai's face lit up with understanding. Exactly. Like a factory that pollutes a river. The factory's self-interest is to minimize costs, so it dumps waste. The invisible hand doesn't account for the poisoned water downstream. The community suffers from this negative externality. That's when a government must intervene with regulations to protect the public good. But be careful, Than warned, jumping back into the fray. Government intervention can lead to government failure. In my city, they imposed strict rent controls to make housing affordable. The result? Landlords couldn't afford upkeep, so buildings fell into disrepair, and no new rental units were built, creating a massive housing shortage. The well-intentioned policy had disastrous, unintended consequences. Professor Kong nodded. A perfect example of the complexities involved. Now let's zoom out to the big picture. Principle 8. A country's standard of living depends on its ability to produce goods and services. It's not about how much gold a country has, but about its productivity. Thang added, the comparison between East and West Germany after World War II is a powerful case study. Same people, same culture, same history. But one embraced policies that boosted productivity and trade, while the other did not. Within a few decades, the difference in the standard of living was staggering. It's all about productivity. And what can destroy the value of that production faster than anything else? Professor Kong asked the class. That brings us to Principle 9. Prices rise when the government prints too much money. We call this inflation. Qian shuddered. You just have to look at the news. Countries that have tried to solve their debt problems by simply printing more money, like Venezuela in recent years, have seen hyperinflation completely destroy their citizens' savings. Imagine your life savings becoming worthless in a matter of months. It's a catastrophic failure of economic management. Just then, the bell for the end of the lecture chimed, its ring cutting through the intense atmosphere. Professor Kong smiled. We've run out of time, and we haven't even touched on the short-run trade-off between inflation and unemployment. But that's the point. Economics isn't a set of dusty answers. It's a living, breathing debate about the choices we make, from the personal to the global. Keep debating, he concluded, his voice rising above the shuffling of books. Keep asking these hard questions. And never, ever accept a simple answer. The entire class erupted in thunderous applause, a wave of appreciation not just for the lesson, but for the intellectual fire he had ignited in them.